Well, greetings, friends. Here's something to think about. In Numbers chapter 16, we read the interesting story, the familiar story of Korah. This was Moses' own cousin, leading a rebellion against Moses. He was joined in that rebellion by Dathan and Abiram and a few other folks. They rebelled against Moses and Aaron and their leadership. They basically said, look, we're just as holy as you are. We're just as called by God as you are. And who made you leader over us? Well, Moses fell on his face before the Lord. He humbled himself so that he could call out to the Lord. And then he said to those who were rebelling, he said, look, tomorrow morning, God is going to show you who is his and who is holy. And so he rebuked them, saying that they were indeed blessed. As a matter of fact, they were. They'd been delivered by God. They had been given the responsibility of service in the tabernacle, caring for all the things that went into the tabernacle, the furniture and all the utensils and even the covering itself. But he said, are you seeking the priesthood too? They were overstepping their bounds, and they grumbled further against Moses so that he eventually called on the Lord, and the Lord's glory appeared. And God said to Moses and to the rest of the congregation, he said, separate yourselves from these rebels. Separate yourselves and come to me. And Moses said, look, God's going to give us a test. And he said, if these men who are rebelling against us, if they die an ordinary death, then God has not chosen me to be the leader. But if something different happens, let's just say the earth opens up and swallows them and all of their houses and all of their people, then you will know that they have spurned the Lord. Well, you know what happens. You know the rest of the story. The ground opened up. It swallowed them up and about 250 men in that rebellion. So much so that all of Israel cried out, hey, the ground may swallow us up. They were fearful, obviously had great fear and reverence for the Lord. But in verse 41, we read this. But on the next day, all of the congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The very next day, they returned to their rebellion. They returned to grumbling and complaining. It kind of reminds me of 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 22. Peter in that passage is talking about people who reject the gospel of Christ. They've heard a bit of it. They've heard some of the Lord's goodness, but it says that they rejected it. And he used a couple of proverbs to remind them of what these people are like. He said, like a dog returns to its own vomit, or a sow after washing, returning to wallowing in the mire. How often do we find ourselves having sinned against the Lord and then made our confession to him, received his discipline through the Spirit and through the Word? How often do we find ourselves returning to the same thing? God has called us to better living. He's called us to holy living. And he empowers us by his Holy Spirit to overcome, so that we won't be like that dog returning to his vomit or the sow wallowing in the mud after it's taken a bath. We instead need to revel in the goodness of the Lord, the blessing of the Lord, and live holy lives without grumbling and complaining, to give glory and honor to him. That's something to think about.